where you start to get better at your skills. It's kind of like in the NBA, the last year on your contract, you have to perform super well. Hi, everyone. This is Data Science Jay, and today I am with Jeff. Jeff is previously on the YouTube channel doing mock interviews where we went over like a LinkedIn data science question. Jeff, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me again.
I wanted to ask you about your last data science interviewing experience. You went through a lot of different interviews. And I remember when you joined Interview Query, we initially talked in the very beginning when you're kind of like in that first stage of checking out like different companies, going through like the recruiter phone screens. And ultimately, now that you landed your job, I would love to ask you about your overall experience and how it went. And so I guess first off, how was the overall interviewing experience during COVID?
Yeah, the overall interview experience, definitely, I think very similar to a lot of others. Definitely pretty tough. Interviewing is a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Sometimes when you pass an interview, you feel really excited and you're like kind of pumped up or you felt like you come out of interview feeling like you crushed it. You're feeling really good. And then there's scenarios where you do get rejected and it's not a great feeling. And there's ups and downs. And I think that that's just part of the process. I definitely feel like I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about interviewing, learned a lot about just data science in general as a whole. So even though it was pretty tough, I definitely got a lot out of it.
Yeah. Was there anything that was different this time around than was previously when you were first interviewing for your last job? I guess like the pre and the post COVID, but also just like for you, you gained a lot of like seniority at your last job in terms of working at DoorDash, in terms of just being like a better data scientist, machine learning engineer, and also just gaining that kind of like experience on the resume. What was the comparison like between the two?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that as you get more experience, it is much easier to get interviews. Like when I had no experience and I applied on the website, usually I would not get any responses.
Yeah.
But I would say now with some experience, I am getting responses actually a good amount of times. And with a little bit more experience, I am probably a little bit pickier about what jobs I want to take compared to when I had no years of experience. I'm like more in this mindset of, hey, I'm going to take whatever job like comes to me, versus now I'm like, okay, even if the job makes me an offer, I actually might not even take it even without any other offers, mainly because I just have a little bit more leverage, a little bit more experience.
Yeah, definitely. The people that are looking for jobs, like their first job ever, they don't really think about all the other aspects that kind of come with it once you get a few more years of experience, and just like how it's more of an equitable, like I choose you and you choose me, instead of just like I'll take anything that gets thrown at me, get that like first morsel of experience. Like, what were your general values that you were looking for when you're looking for another position?
Yeah, so I think the values definitely change over time, but this time my top value was company with a product that I use and a product that I love. That was the first one. The second one, I was looking for interesting problems. So problems that I was just intrinsically motivated to solve and try to understand.
Yeah.
The third one was more of a really good direct report manager relationship. Those are like the essential ones. I had some more nice to have, such as like location, the types of company culture, things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say those are the top three.
Nice. One of the things that I liked that you did for your interviewing experience as well was that throughout the whole job search, you were tracking all your metrics. And in the blog post that you talked about this metric called like applications, or it was applications per outcome, right? Or applications per offer.
Yeah. Applications per offer. Yeah, that's right.
And
That's right.
so I was wondering like how you kind of got to that metric, or like how you decided to start tracking these stats.
Yeah. Why did I start tracking the stats? Yeah. I mean, I guess I had this intuition where I wanted to know what was actually working and what actually wasn't working. And I felt like with the interview process, there's just like a lot of, you have like a certain allotted amount of time
Yep.
To spend. I wasn't really sure what was the best way to spend my time. So I kind of had this intuition to tell myself that, hey, I'm going to start tracking my metrics. But I didn't really like think to really take a deep dive into analyzing it till later on. So that was kind of what drove me to start doing that. And what was the second part of your question?
I think it was just like how you got to this applications per offer metric.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that like a lot of times, especially when you have no years of experience, you have no idea how much effort you have to put in. And especially like when you apply maybe the first 10 times, you only like, you get rejected and you're like, oh, I'm not a good fit for it. But I think that like the beauty of actually like crafting a number, maybe it's like applications per offer, maybe it's something else, is that you have like a tangible number on how much effort you need to put in to kind of expect a certain result. And of course, there's a lot of variance across each individual person, so it's not a perfect model. But I think that the beauty of a metric like that is if I know that I need 100 applications to get one offer, then it's easy to break it down to say something like, I need to put in 20 applications per week, and then over 5 weeks. And then you have to also account for, say, like, interview study time. And when you do have interviews, you're not actually applying. That can kind of give you a good gauge on how much time you need to spend on applying for jobs.
Mhm.
And when you get your first rejection, and if you don't get the offer immediately, you have the knowledge that, hey, it's actually going to take some time, and it's actually going to take multiple tries to eventually get the result that I want.
I agree. And I think that is a great way to definitely encourage someone to be able to continue to apply to jobs when they get rejected, but also you can understand where you fall relative to other people. If, let's say, like a lot of people started tracking it, your application per offer is like 200 to 1, or you've done like 300 applications and you haven't gotten an offer yet, that's kind of like a better indication that, okay, maybe it's time to like look at the pipeline and see what I need to fix. Like, is my resume, does it have like a glaring typo? Do I need to fix the initial like recruiter screen or like the technical screen, and like kind of going through that process? Look back in retrospective on general job searching experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in a perfect world, we'd actually have the average applications per offer
Yeah.
across all the different applicants, but we don't. But I think the benefit of posting these things online is that, exactly like you said, if somebody is like applying for 300 jobs and they're not getting any interviews, if you see others, they're getting maybe interviews every like 50 jobs they're applying to and maybe similar levels of experience, then that basically tells you that, hey, there's something I need to kind of fix or tweak, either with my resume, cover letter, or my like strategy of applying, or which companies I'm applying for, in order to get that number down. So it does give you kind of a good indicator of what part of my strategy I need to kind of tweak and improve.
So one thing that I also noticed when I talked to a few other members was this idea of like people actually, when they're interviewing, right, like they get a lot better at understanding data science. There's this one kind of like test prep part of it, which is kind of what we do at Interview Query too, is just like, okay, you got to go through and remember everything and basically brush up on your skill set. But did you find yourself actually learning new concepts and actually really upskilling yourself a noticeable amount when you were interviewing and preparing for these different job interviews?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's like a couple that come to mind. There's one position that I was interviewing. The position was a forecasting position. And I have some experience doing forecasting, but more machine learning forecasting, not time series based, like ARIMA based forecasting. And I knew that they were going to ask me about ARIMA modeling. So I actually kind of refreshed all that knowledge around ARIMA myself. And I was actually able to pass the interview, and they asked me a bunch of questions on like, how do you determine the number of lags? What does the moving average term mean? Why do you need a difference? How do you account for seasonality? Things like that. And I wouldn't have known how to answer that unless I had the interview, which kind of forced me to study. And the second one that comes to mind is I knew that one of the positions was going to ask me how to productionize machine learning models, but more specifically, how to productionize it in real time, like real time streaming versus batch processing.
Yep.
So I had a lot of experience with batch processing, so that was not really a problem at all. But I didn't really do anything related to real-time streaming. I knew they were going to ask me about it, so I actually learned how to do it. Now I just like still remember how to do it. You have to like create the endpoints. You have to figure out what data is going to go into the JSON file, how many times you need to hit the endpoint, things like that. So those are two things that came to mind that I didn't really know before, but going through the interview process, I actually learned because of it.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of indicative of this weird incentive of where, at least for me, I felt that during some of my job stints, stretches of my job, if I knew that my job position was pretty secure, then there was more of an optimization on my part for doing the normal amount of work, right? Or not going anywhere beyond. Or if I knew that I couldn't get to some next level, I didn't know what the next level was, then I wasn't going to work particularly hard to get it. But when you're interviewing, now suddenly you're on the market, you're like this, I don't know, metamorphosed thing that someone has to value. And I think that's where you start to get better at your skills yourself, right? It's kind of like in the NBA, the last year on your contract, you have to perform super well because that's what you're getting judged on and how well you're doing. And I kind of see that akin to that for at least data scientists. If I can at least make a reference to NBA players to data scientists, that's gonna be mine.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting analogy because when we are on the clock or when we're under pressure, it kind of forces us to be better, especially in the interview sense. It's like once you get the job, it's very easy to coast and like maybe not spend time outside of work to really improve your skills. But then when you do have to interview, it kind of creates this fire within yourself to improve. And I've been like trying to figure out, okay, I had this fire to really get better at data science over the last few months. How can I actually maintain this fire throughout my next job? Because I just feel like if I was able to do this just throughout, of course, without burning myself out, my skill set would just be like way higher if we like multiply it like a couple years down the line. So that definitely makes sense.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the drive to learn is definitely tough. A lot of it for me is definitely like internal incentives. Like, do I want to do it? If I want to do it, then obviously great, then that's what you're going to spend a lot of your time doing. But if you don't want to do it, then it's a lot tougher. And that's kind of how I thought about continuing on when working on a study product. If you'd assume that interview query is a study product, my goal is to try to build general things that can at least help people with their interviewing because of the stuff that you're talking about, like brushing up on your skills is tough. So it's like, if you can remind them to study, that is generally a good thing. Like I just saw The Social Dilemma, so I know notifications are bad, but
Mhm.
like at least if you're pushing them to learn, right? I guess I can reason that out for myself.
Got it. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that documentary, but I haven't actually seen it. But I feel like once I hear it from like a lot of people, then maybe I'll check it out. But yeah, that's kind of off topic. But yeah, how do you kind of maintain this fire to learn, especially with your interview query product? Because a lot of these practice questions definitely really helped me to solidify a lot of the concepts. I think for me, it was a lot of the statistics. Like I wasn't as comfortable doing like probability questions, and I just felt a lot more comfortable afterwards. And actually, in that blog post, I applied some of the probability concepts, like using the binomial theorem to compute what the probabilities are for how likely you're going to pass the interview. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely got a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the same way I'm thinking about these problems now, because I think interview questions in general are just problems boiled down into a 30 to 60-minute time slot that you talk through. And I think that it's not about just achieving the right answer anymore, right? It's a lot of it's just about working through it and like trying to understand the way you think.
Mhm.
And ultimately, like you can apply interview questions to really anything. It's just taking a problem and I think sizing it down to a
Mhm.
general margin that you can tackle. So, given the whole job search, was there anything that you came across that was like crazy interview experience, or do you have like a really like a worse interview experience in your mind, or just any kind of thing that stood out to you?
I guess like the one that comes to mind is there was one company that I interviewed for. It made it to their on-site, and I actually felt like I crushed the on-site, and I felt like I did really well. And then the recruiter calls me the next day, and she said, "Hey, like your feedback was really good. However, we actually filled this position last week." So I was like thinking, why did you why did I like go through all of that if you guys already filled the position? I probably would have preferred for you just to tell me, hey, we filled the position. We can't really continue on with the interview because because I had to like allocate time, wake up early, make sure I was like prepared. I spent a lot of time preparing for the interview, so
Yeah.
that was probably a little bit of a frustrating moment. Although I think in terms of consolation, they said, hey, like next time, like once we have an opening, we want to hire you. Just like you can just be the hiring manager. You don't have to like interview again, and
Yeah.
then you can just like bypass the whole process. So that was like one that was a bit frustrating for me. I think there was like another interview that asked me how to like code a k-means algorithm from scratch, and I was thinking,
Yes.
yeah, I think I messaged you about this, and I was like I only had like 20 minutes to do it. So I was just like, are they expecting me to get this code to run in 20 minutes? Because I feel like, coding a k-means from scratch and making sure it runs properly is like at least a couple hours of like, debugging and all that.
Yeah.
But luckily they didn't expect me to do that. They just wanted to see if I knew the algorithm and I can change, like turn logic into code. But I was a little bit baffled at the time when I got that kind of question. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
That's kind of interesting how you then decoded it a little bit. Yeah, I do like it's kind of weird if like their expectation is kind of strange like that. It reminds me of a lot of that like inverse of binary tree kind of interview question, which
Mhm.
I don't really understand why, people would expect that. But if that's the level they are trying to achieve, then maybe it's
Yeah, yeah.
around good. How many interviews did you actually end up going through? Do you remember?
Yeah, a total of 74. I got like a 50% response rate. So it was probably around like 35 to 40. I don't remember the exact number, but 35 to 40 companies. And then, yeah, in terms of interviews, I don't know the exact number of interviews, but yeah, if we do like 35 to 40 companies, portion of them, let's say like I get like 1.5 interviews each, 1.5 to 2. So maybe like 45 to 50 interviews total. Yeah.
Did you feel drained like at the end of the day when you're doing these?
Yeah, it was definitely really draining, especially when I had to work during the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty tough. There were many scenarios when I got burnt out. And I think specifically I got burnt out, especially if I have to do a take home assignment. That is the thing that really burns me out
Yeah.
because I have to work during the week. And then, usually the weekends I would either chill or rest. But a lot of these take home assignments, they ask you to do it for spend like no more than 4 hours. But we all know that nobody spends like everybody spends a lot more time than that.
Yeah.
So, and because they want to do a good job, so I'll actually spend part of my weekend doing the take home. But I like gave myself a rule that I have to at least take one day off because I've worked through the weekend doing take homes, and it just wasn't really a pleasant experience.
No, that
Yeah.
sounds horrible. Take homes are interesting. I have notoriously been pretty against them, but I think that's actually from a candidate perspective. But I also think that if you are on the employer side, it's pretty rude to ask for a candidate to spend more than 3 hours on a take home, I think, because that
Mhm.
is a huge chunk of time. And on the employer side myself, like I just hired a data science intern actually.
Nice.
And I specifically try to construct a take home that would take less than an hour, but
Mhm.
still try to optimize that signal ratio to the amount of people that would actually go ahead and complete it because it was
Mhm.
within a specific allotted amount of time or just like within a specific amount of effort, right? Unless you're building like a model to production or something and they like need to know that you can do that, it doesn't seem like a company really needs to spend 3 or 4 hours on crafting a take home assignment for a candidate to do. So
Yeah, I actually had an idea. I was talking to a friend about this who's not in data science, but like everybody does different fields do take homes. The frustrating thing for me is when you do a take home and you get an automated rejection email because it's like you spent a lot of time. You don't even get any feedback on how you could have done better. That is like the most frustrating part for me. But I think that like one idea I had was what if you got a take home and if you pass the take home, the company would actually pay you for the time you spent. And then in that scenario, if you because you could do a crappy job, like if you do a crappy job, then yeah, nobody should pay you. But if you do a great job and it's say like they give you a take home on a problem related to the business, then in a way it's kind of like a consulting, and you should get compensated if you have good ideas.
yeah.
And I think that in that scenario, the company would be a little bit more stringent on who they give the take home to. They'll be a little bit more on guard versus just send like a take home to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just like another idea. I like don't really have a great solution behind it because I understand it from the employer's perspective. It's like a little pretty high risk to hire somebody without knowing what kind of work they can do. So yeah, there is like definitely both sides to it.
Yeah, I also think it's like a signal for this is my like continual bias as now not like kind of an individual contributor anymore, but I think it's like a signal for people that are, can do tasks when they're outlined in instructions, right? Because I also think that there's like a willingness for someone to, I think, do tasks that they might not internally be interested in. And
Mhm.
I think that I'm like a really bad example of that. And because I hated take homes, because I felt like there was no incentive that I was getting from doing it. Whereas some people are actually really good at being internally motivated towards just doing the best on anything that they want to achieve on, right? And I think take homes are actually like a pretty good signal for that because of the fact that you are giving them essentially like free work and they're doing it to the best of their ability. And if they are, then you can actually move them forward. But I really like your idea too. And I think that, at least for me, it seems like take homes function as both a filter and just like a demonstration of your work. And so if you can do a take home and accurately put everyone on a distribution and see where someone who's actually really good lies on your candidate pool, then that's like a pretty good way of determining basically the efficacy of your take home, but also just, are we competitive? Is our job listing competitive even? It is also a good way to find undervalued candidates that don't meet the traditional experience bar that recruiters might pass on. It's definitely changed from when you go from candidate to employer. I remember literally going through, it's literally possible to go through 200 resumes and choose 5 people to interview face to face, talking to them just by their resume, because of the fact that all the expectations might not even match on that regard as well. It's definitely like a weird shift from just perspective. Thanks for coming on, Jeff. Where can I direct people if they want to find you, follow you online?
Yeah, my website is jeffleechronicles.com. Follow me on Twitter, JeffMLI. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. You can feel free to tweet me or send me a message, or you can check out my blog. Yeah, happy to help out whoever needs any help with interviews, data science, or anything in general. Yeah, definitely can help where I can. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Jeff is actually a coach too. Thanks for working with us.
Yeah,
And
of course.
I read your blog and it's great. I think your 12 tasks in 12 months thing is very, very interesting. And I've always wanted to do something like that. And then I just completely forget on like month 2. This year, it was going to be like learn Vietnamese in month 2. And then I just like, I haven't even downloaded like any of the Duolingo apps. And you got like, you did Spanish for like a month, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, I think Spanish was, learning any language in a month is like very, very difficult and requires a lot of effort and energy.
Yeah.
And that's not something I could really sustain if I was working at the same time as well. So yeah, I mean, like if you didn't learn Vietnamese in a month, I wouldn't beat myself up, because it's and you're like building a company. So I feel like trying to do like learn a language in a month and like building a company is I'm not sure how, like it might be possible, but it's hard for me to imagine that.
Yeah, it was definitely a stretch goal, I think. I did Sober February, and that was actually pretty fun. Maybe pre-COVID also worked a little bit better, but like the other one that I thought was really interesting that you did was the like saying hi to people or just talking to them like strangers.
Yeah,
I feel like that one is actually like great and something that I've wanted to do in the past. Just like, but just talking to myself too. I was like, hey, like today I should be talking to like the coffee shop, barista and, some other surfer down the line. And then every single time it's just like, no, I can talk to myself instead.
Yeah, I think that is because I'm naturally more introverted, but through doing those exercises, I've kind of trained myself to feel very comfortable with strangers. Yeah, it definitely helps, and I think helps break out of your bubble. And yeah, it was pretty fun.
Everyone should read that blog. But off that tangent, I'll talk to you later, Jeff.
Cool. Thanks, Jay.